I shoved open the door to my bedroom and froze in place. Two men in paint-flecked overalls were smearing thick coats of white across my coral-colored walls. My paisley curtains were crumpled in a heap on the floor. My dresser had been dragged into the middle of the room, with cans of dripping paint balanced carelessly on the polished wood I had painstakingly restored. Dorian, my 36-year-old son, leaned lazily against the frame, arms folded, grinning as if he had just pulled off the cleverest prank. Beside him, Sienna, my daughter-in-law, scrolled her phone with that smug little smirk she wore whenever she thought she had the upper hand. The brush in midair stilled when they noticed me. The younger painter gave me an uneasy glance, as though I had walked in on a secret I wasn't supposed to see. The sharp tang of paint hit the back of my throat, stirring the dizziness and the heat of anger building inside me. What is the meaning of this? My voice cracked weaker than I wanted it to. I had just dragged myself home from an 11-hour shift at the Hearthstone Diner, a place I'd poured 16 years of my life into, serving families as they toasted birthdays and anniversaries, while I blistered my hands in scalding oil. My feet screamed in my worn shoes, my back ached from bending over stoves all day, but none of that compared to the sight before me. Sienna finally lifted her head, flashing me that saccharine smile she reserved for manipulation. "Oh, Mama, you're home earlier than expected. We're just making a few changes before we move in." Her tone was as casual as someone chatting about the weather. Dorian pushed off the doorframe, stepping toward me with that self-assuredness that had always unsettled me. "Mom, it's a surprise. This room is too much space for one person. We need the room. The kids are getting bigger and our apartment's too cramped." My knees weakened. 22 years in that suffocating kitchen, saving every dollar, choking on grill smoke, bowing to irate customers, scrubbing grease until midnight, also I could buy this house. Also I could have one place that was mine, where no one else's permission was needed. The older painter coughed awkwardly. "Ma'am, if this is an issue, we can stop and come back another day." No, keep at it." Sienna waved him on with a queen's authority. "We've already paid. Might as well get it done." "Paid? With what money?" The answer clawed at me before I even finished the thought. The money I had loaned them last month after Dorian lost his job at the shipyard. The money I'd torn from my savings when Sienna wept to me about overdue rent. Dorian came closer, setting a hand on my shoulder in a gesture that no longer comforted me. "Don't get upset. It's just paint. And we've spoken to an architect already. We'll divide the house. You'll have your side, we'll have ours. Like one big happy family. One big happy family." The phrase rattled through me, empty, cold. I stared at my wrinkled curtains tossed on the floor, curtains I had sewn from fabric bought at the market after 3 weeks of hoarding tips. I stared at the widening paint stain creeping across my dresser, the dresser I discovered at a yard sale and refinished with my own aching hands. And who decided this? My voice steadied, rising sharp. "When did you sit down and map out the future of my house without so much as asking me?" Sienna sighed dramatically, tucking her phone into her pocket. "Mama, you're always so difficult when we try to do something nice. That dull color you had was awful. The white will be gorgeous. You'll thank us later." Gorgeous for who? I wanted to scream. I had chosen that coral shade carefully after days of sifting through paint swatches. It reminded me of the sunsets I used to watch from the tiny window of my old rented room, the sunsets that carried me through nights when I dreamed of one day painting walls that belonged to me. The painters pressed on with their brushes, pretending not to hear, though I caught their sidelong glances whenever voices rose. The younger one had streaks of dried paint even in his hair. I wondered what they were being paid for this rushed intrusion. Dorian circled the room like an inspector. "See? It'll be brighter. When we move in our furniture, you'll understand." Sienna already found a gorgeous bedroom set on discount. Their furniture. In my sanctuary. In the space I had filled with things stitched together from sweat and sacrifice, things that carried stories. Sienna drifted to my vanity, brushing a finger over my lotions and secondhand perfumes. "All this clutter we can tidy up. You don't need so many things, Mama. When you're older, it's better to simplify." Simplify. As though my little tokens were trash weighing them down. As though my 68 years had reduced me to some unwanted border in my own home. Something cracked inside me. Not just because of the paint suffocating my walls or my furniture dragged out of place, but because they had written my future without me, treating me like an old chair to be shoved in the corner. That moment, watching strangers coat my haven, I knew it was time to fight back, even if it meant severing myself from the only family left. My name is Celeste Navarro. I am 68 years old. For 16 years, I've toiled in the kitchen at the Hearthstone Diner, where families gather for birthdays and milestones while I sweat behind the stoves. I arrive at 5 each morning to start the stock that simmers for hours, and I leave at 7 at night, my uniform reeking of grease and my hair heavy with the scent of onions. Before the Hearthstone, it was always other kitchens, 3 of them, faceless restaurants where I remained invisible, a shadow behind the dishes that customers devoured. My hands are etched with small scars from burns and slipping blades. My nails, once polished pink, now clipped plain for hygiene. I was widowed 13 years ago. Elias, my husband, collapsed from a heart attack on a Sunday afternoon, television humming in the background. A good man who built furniture his whole life, leaving me with memories richer than any savings account. After his funeral, I stayed in the apartment we had shared since marriage, paying $620 a month to a landlord who hiked the rent yearly without mending a thing. Dorian wasn't always like this. As a boy, he was shy, clinging to me after my long shifts, folding laundry at my side, chattering about his day. But all that shifted when he met Sienna. She stormed into his world like a tempest, all grand visions and extravagant dreams. She spoke of European vacations, sleek cars, and homes in posh neighborhoods where successful people lived. At first, I believed it was a blessing that my son had an ambitious woman at his side. Elias had always been content with modest comforts, and I feared Dorian had inherited that same quiet acceptance of life, sometimes mistaken for a lack of drive. But I quickly realized that Sienna's ambitions came at a cost others were expected to cover. When they married, I lent them $1,200 for the celebration, money I had tucked away penny by penny in a cookie tin, because I never trusted banks. They swore they would repay me in 6 months. That was 9 years ago. When their first child was born, they needed another $950 for hospital bills. When the second came, it was $140 for a used crib and stroller. There was always some urgent need, always a promise of repayment that never came. I never asked them to return it. A mother doesn't charge her son interest, I told myself. But deep inside, I knew my kindness had become their convenience. Why cut back on luxuries or find side work when it was simpler to come knocking on my door? Life in the kitchen teaches you to be tough. When the head cook barks because a plate came out 2 minutes late. When servers blame you for the soup being lukewarm. When your swollen feet cry for rest, but there are still 5 hours left on your shift, you learn no one will stand up for you if you don't stand for yourself. And you learn the worth of money. Every dollar I earned meant half an hour standing over a blazing grill or scrubbing stockpots until my arms were raw from steaming water that reddened my skin up to the elbows. That's why I hoarded every bit I could. A few dollars from weekend tips when I worked holidays, $50 bonuses when the diner hosted a special event. I survived on the barest minimum, secondhand clothes, plain meals cooked at home, entertainment limited to free TV shows. Sundays, my single day off, I wandered the flea market searching for things useful and cheap. That's where I found my dresser for $45, the same one now blotched with white paint. After Elias's passing, loneliness became my closest companion. I'd return home exhausted, but no one waited with a cup of tea or asked how my day had been. Weekends stretched endlessly. Dorian would visit on occasion, always with Sienna and the children, but those visits felt more like evaluations than family time. They'd peer into my fridge, criticize how cramped the apartment was, hinting that maybe it was time to look into a senior community. A senior community. As though being 68 meant I was suddenly unfit to make choices, as though working 42 hours a week in a kitchen proved nothing about my resilience. Sienna had a knack for making me feel outdated. She'd gush about phone apps I'd never heard of, trendy eateries she'd tried, or influential people she'd met through Dorian's work. She always wrapped her stories with that condescending pat on my hand and the same line, "Oh, Mama, What would you know about these modern things? But I knew things she didn't. I knew how to make a $1,350 monthly paycheck stretch through 30 days. I knew how to lift stubborn stains from clothing and coax broken appliances back to life with patience and ingenuity. I knew how to push through 12-hour shifts without whining. And I knew how to save money, even when it seemed impossible. For decades, my dream had been simple: to own my own home. Not large or fancy, just a place where I could paint walls any color I wished, plant flowers in a small patch of soil, and invite coworkers for coffee without begging a landlord's permission. A place that was wholly mine. That dream became urgent after the building owner announced renovations. We had 3 months to vacate or accept a $250 rent increase. For me, that $250 was the difference between living with dignity and scraping through every week. That's when I made the choice that changed my life. For 32 years, I had been quietly saving. Not just the money Dorian and Sienna knew about, but hidden stashes, coins, and bills tucked away where no one would think to look. Beneath my mattress, a plastic bag filled with crumpled singles. At the bottom of the closet, an old coffee tin with weekend tips. Sewn into the hem of my Sunday best, $700 in 50s stitched carefully by my own hand. When I finally counted it all, it came to $4,500, a fortune for someone earning $230 a week. Every bill carried a story of restraint: shoes never bought, takeout meals declined, miles walked instead of bus fare spent. The morning I decided to find a house was a Tuesday. I woke with a strange fire in me, as if something long dormant had finally stirred. I put on my best outfit, counted my savings once more, and went out to explore neighborhoods where houses might fit within my reach. The first one I saw was in a quiet district, 40 minutes by bus from the Hearthstone. It was modest: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen, and a backyard hardly bigger than a dining table. The paint peeled, the windows sagged, and weeds overtook the yard. But there, in the master bedroom, was a wide east-facing window, perfect for greeting the sunrise. The real estate agent, a young man with slick hair and a salesman's grin, barely disguised his doubt when I expressed interest. "Ma'am, this property is $41,000. Are you pre-approved for financing?" "I don't need a loan," I said. "I'll pay in cash." His demeanor flipped instantly. Suddenly, I wasn't an old woman wasting his morning, but a client worth courting. He paraded me through each corner of the home, extolling its virtues: a bathroom updated 5 years ago, an electrical system in good condition, a kitchen with room enough for a small table. But my mind was already set. That window was all I needed. After years in dark apartments choked by taller buildings, I could finally sip my morning coffee with the sunrise. I could keep plants on the sill. I could feel alive instead of just useful. That very afternoon, I offered $36,000. The seller accepted without hesitation. They had been trying to sell for 8 months without luck. Too plain for wealthier buyers, too costly for those with none. But perfect for someone like me. The legal process took 4 weeks. For weeks I told no one: not Dorian, not Sienna, not even Mireia, my closest coworker. Each night I came home imagining the life awaiting me: what colors I'd splash on the walls, how I'd arrange my meager furniture, how I'd shape the kitchen for cooking meals just for myself. When the final papers were signed, my hands trembled with excitement, not nerves. At 66 years old, for the first time, I would own something entirely mine. Something no landlord could raise or reclaim. When the keys were placed in my palm, I lingered outside that door, savoring the moment. Once I stepped inside, I would no longer be Celeste, who had always adapted to borrowed spaces. I would be Celeste the homeowner. Celeste, who had achieved what many with cushier jobs and higher education never managed. The house was bare, musty, its walls echoing, but it was mine. I wandered from room to room, running my fingertips across the walls, flipping light switches, opening windows to let air rush in. In the master bedroom, I paused before that glorious window and smiled for the first time in months. That night, I lay on the floor wrapped in a blanket from my rented apartment. No furniture, no luxuries, but something far greater: a place of my own. I felt with every fiber of my being that this house was mine, each inch claimed by my sacrifices. The trouble began when I decided to share the news with Dorian and Sienna. I invited them for dinner the following Sunday. I spent 4 hours preparing their favorite dish, braised lamb stew, and set the table with my best plates. I wanted the evening to be celebratory, a chance to share my triumph with the only people I still called family. Dorian arrived sullen. He had just been let go from the shipyard the week before, after too many late arrivals, and his job search wasn't going well. Sienna came in complaining about the heat, the endless traffic, and how the children had tested her patience all week. I held back my news until dessert. "I have something important to tell you," I began, my voice light though excitement bubbled underneath. Sienna sighed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, Mama, don't tell me you're about to get sentimental. We've got enough burdens as it is." "No, it's good news. I bought a house." The silence that followed could have been sliced with a knife. Dorian froze with his fork midair. Sienna stared at me as if I had announced I was marrying an alien. "You bought a house?" Dorian finally asked. "A modest one in Halcyon Grove. 2 bedrooms, a yard. Perfect for me." Sienna straightened in her chair. "With what money? Where did you come up with $36,000? I explained, years of saving from my wages and tips, tucking away small amounts until it added up. Her face shifted, shock curdled into a look I recognized but couldn't name at first. Anger? Resentment? Perhaps both. "Why didn't you tell us?" Dorian asked. "We could have helped you find something better, somewhere closer to the city, somewhere safer." I didn't need help. "I found what I wanted," I said simply. Sienna shoved her chair back, standing abruptly. "This is unreal. We're scraping by, begging for help with the kids' expenses, and all this time you've had thousands stashed away. They weren't hidden. They were saved." "It's the same thing," she snapped. "Do you realize how many times we came to you in need? Borrowing scraps from you while you were sitting on a fortune." Dorian tried to soothe her, but I saw it in his eyes, he thought the same. To them, my money was always theirs in waiting. The thought that I might have dreams of my own had never crossed their minds. "You're not young anymore to live alone," Sienna pressed. "What if you get sick? Or fall with no one around to help?" "I'm perfectly capable," I countered. "I work 9 hours a day. I manage my affairs. I don't need to be watched over." But she had already planted her seed. "Mama, at your age you need to be practical. You should sell that house, move in with us. We could pool the money for a larger place where we'd all fit comfortably." There it was. Barely 10 minutes after learning of my accomplishment, they were already plotting how to absorb it into their lives. Moving into my house took 3 full weekends. With no money for movers, I ferried my belongings bit by bit on the public bus. Each trip, 2 oversized bags bulging with clothes, books, and the trinkets I had guarded for years. The drivers began to recognize me, some even lifting the heaviest bags up the steps. The refrigerator and washing machine were the worst. For that, I asked Mireya's cousin Arturo, who owned an old but reliable pickup. I gave him $65 for the favor, money he needed more than I, but to me it symbolized independence. Seeing my appliances in my own kitchen was worth every penny. Those first few months were the happiest I could remember. I woke each morning bathed in sunlight pouring through my beloved window, lingering under the blankets just to savor the silence that belonged to no one but me. No neighbors shouting through thin walls. No footsteps pounding overhead. No blaring midnight music. After work, instead of entering a building thick with the smell of other tenants' meals, I came home to the fragrance of the scented candles I sometimes treated myself to. I planted lavender asters and ivory marigolds in the yard, bought cheap at the local nursery. I knew nothing of gardening, but the library's Sunday tutorials taught me enough. The kitchen was my sanctuary. Small, but perfectly arranged to my liking. Every pot had a place. Every knife exactly where I expected it. After decades of chaos in commercial kitchens, having a space of order and calm was luxury itself. On weekends, I poured leftover wages into small improvements. I bought paint on clearance, $14 per can, and coated the living room in a soft yellow that recalled my grandmother's kitchen. The bathroom I painted mint green, inspired by a magazine left behind at the diner. Each color transformed the rooms completely. When the faucet broke, I refused to hire a plumber who would have charged $120. I spent $18 on parts and fixed it myself. When a window swelled and stuck, I sanded it until it shut smoothly. Dorian and Sienna visited twice in those early months, both times dimming my joy. The first was 3 weeks after I moved in. They appeared unannounced one Saturday as I planted orange zinnias in the yard. "Mom, this neighborhood feels rough," Dorian remarked as he climbed from the car. "Look at these sagging porches, these yards full of weeds." Sienna strode inside, running her fingers along the freshly painted walls as though they'd crumble under her touch. "This kitchen's tiny. Where will you host guests? And this bathroom, the tile is ancient." I loved my bathroom. Its tile, from the 60s, gleamed under my scrubbing, and the towels I'd found on sale matched the green walls perfectly. The second visit was worse. They arrived during a storm and found a small leak in the guest room ceiling. Rather than offering to help, Sienna seized the chance to catalog the house's flaws. "Look, Mama, this place is falling apart. That water stain will rot the wood. These old windows don't insulate. Your electric bill will skyrocket come winter." Dorian added his voice, feigning worry. "Mom, this isn't safe for an older woman. The corner house has broken panes, and there are abandoned cars down the street. What if burglars come?" "Those worries exist everywhere," I replied. "But here, at least, I own my walls." Still, their words burrowed deep. Every creak at night, every careless neighbor, every repair whispered their criticisms back to me. The maintenance was steady but manageable: $24 to fix a dripping pipe, $7 to patch the roof myself, $55 for an electrician to check a sparking outlet. The whispers of doubt were relentless. Every late-night creak in the house, every gust of wind rattling the shutters, every neighbor who left their trash piled too high, all of it echoed back Sienna's words. Unsafe. Falling apart. Not fit for a woman your age. I pushed the thoughts down, but they slithered back when I was most tired, most alone. Still, I endured. Every repair I made, every patched pipe, every mended roof tile, every flickering light I fixed with my own 2 hands became a quiet act of defiance. My house wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was determined to keep it that way. That determination was tested one humid afternoon in late July. I was in the kitchen, slicing onions for a stew, when a heavy knock rattled the front door. When I opened it, there stood Dorian and Sienna, the children tugging at their arms. Dorian's jaw was tight, Sienna's lips pressed into a hard line that never boded well. "We need to talk, Mama," Dorian said, brushing past me before I could answer. Sienna followed, already scanning the living room with narrowed eyes. "Still painting everything yourself? It smells like cheap paint in here." I forced a steady breath. "What is it this time?" Dorian didn't sit. He paced the length of the living room like a man rehearsing a speech. "We can't keep going like this. The rent, the bills, the kids, we're drowning. And then there's you, holed up in this place like it's some castle, while we scrape for pennies." I tightened my grip on the counter. "I worked decades for this. Every dollar in these walls is sweat from my back. I've helped you more times than I can count. And yet you kept thousands hidden," Sienna snapped. "Thousands, while we begged for help. What kind of mother does that?" Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the air. The children flinched. I steadied myself. The kind of mother who knows she won't live forever. Who wanted something of her own before it was too late. Sienna laughed bitterly. "Of your own? At 68? You're one bad fall from being helpless, Mama. Don't you see? This house isn't a triumph. It's a burden. For all of us." Dorian stopped pacing and looked at me with a pleading expression, but his words betrayed him. "It's not safe for you here. And the money tied up in this place could fix everything. We could buy a bigger home together. One where the kids have space, where we all live comfortably." There it was again, the refrain I'd heard since the night I told them. Sell the house. Hand it over. Become part of their plan. "No," I said firmly. "This house is mine. It will stay mine until I'm gone." Silence. Then Sienna's eyes narrowed into slits. "Until you're gone? Fine. Maybe we don't have to wait that long. The words chilled me to the marrow. Dorian muttered her name in warning, but she didn't back down. She planted herself in front of me, her perfume cloying, her voice a hiss. You can't keep this forever. If you won't give it, we'll find another way. The children tugged at her sleeves again, but she shook them off. Dorian dragged her toward the door, muttering apologies I didn't believe. The moment they were gone, I locked every bolt, every chain, every latch. And still, the house felt suddenly porous, as though they had left cracks in its foundation just by standing inside it. The weeks that followed were tense. I buried myself in routine, morning coffee by the sunrise window, long shifts at the Hearthstone Diner, Sundays at the library learning new repairs. But the threat lingered like smoke. Whenever the phone rang late at night, my chest tightened. Whenever footsteps echoed too close on the sidewalk, I froze. Then came the letter. It was folded neatly into my mailbox one Friday. No return address. Just my name scrawled across the front. Inside, a single sentence in Sienna's handwriting. You'll regret making this difficult. I sat at my kitchen table, letter trembling in my hands, fury burning hotter than fear. For all her venom, she had never been so brazen. I thought of tearing it up, but instead, I slid it into the drawer beside my bed. Proof. In case the day came when I'd need it. And then the accidents began. First, my tires were slashed in the night. The police came, shrugged, and said kids sometimes caused trouble. Then my back fence collapsed not from age, but from nails deliberately pried loose. Finally, one evening as I left the diner, I found Dorian waiting near the bus stop. You need to reconsider, he said, his voice low. Sienna's right. This house, it's not worth what it's costing all of us. All of us? I asked, stepping closer. Or just you? His jaw worked, but no words came. I left him standing there, my hands shaking all the way home. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. I returned from work to find my front door ajar. My heart stuttered as I pushed inside. The living room was ransacked. Drawers overturned, cabinets emptied, even the cushions of my couch slashed open. The house smelled of dust and rage. In the bedroom, my dresser lay on its side, splintered from the force. The stash of small emergency bills I had hidden in its bottom drawer was gone. My sanctuary had been violated. I sank onto the floor, tears streaking my face. Not for the money, though losing it cut deep, but for the betrayal. For the knowledge that the only people who might have done this were the ones who had once been my reason to live. I stayed there for hours, staring at the ruin of what I had built. When the moonlight crept across the floor, I finally stood. My hands trembled, but my resolve had never been clearer. If they wanted war, I would give it to them. I changed the locks the next morning, hired a locksmith with money I didn't have to spare. I reported the break-in, though I knew the police would do little. And then I began to plan. Not how to retreat, but how to protect the one thing they wanted most. The house had cost me decades of sweat, of sacrifice, of loneliness. It was my legacy, my fortress. And if Dorian and Sienna thought they could take it from me, they were about to learn what I had learned long ago in the heat of the diner's kitchen. No one defends you if you don't defend yourself first. The house no longer felt like a refuge. Every creak of the wood made me flinch, every shadow in the yard made my pulse race. But fear had burned into something harder now resolve. On Sunday morning, I walked into the library and sat at one of the computers, fingers trembling as I typed. I searched, how to secure your property against family disputes. Page after page warned of loopholes and betrayals. One phrase returned again and again, estate planning. I didn't want to think about death, but if I didn't, Dorian and Sienna would bleed me dry while I was still alive. That afternoon, I called a lawyer whose name I found on the bulletin board pinned between ads for babysitters and guitar lessons. Her office was 2 bus rides away, in a brick building that smelled of old paper and strong coffee. She listened while I poured out my story, the money, the house, the break-in, the threats. She didn't flinch. They want control, she said simply. But if you put the property in a living trust, they can't touch it. Not without your say. And when you pass, you decide who inherits. Not them. For the first time in weeks, I breathed deeply. I signed the papers, shaking with relief as if I had built new walls around my home. My house was safe. But Sienna wasn't finished. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of voices outside. Through the blinds, I saw them, Dorian and Sienna, standing in the yard, arguing in low tones. The children sat in the car, its headlights slicing across my flowers, my lavender asters and ivory marigolds crushed under their wheels. I opened the door before they could knock. "What are you doing here?" Dorian's face was pale. "Mama, we just want to talk." "Talk," I snapped. "You've broken into my house, stolen from me, and now you come in the dead of night?" Sienna stepped forward, chin high. "We're your family. Everything you have should be shared. You're being selfish, clinging to this place like it means more than we do." "Selfish." My laugh came out raw, jagged. "I gave you money for your wedding, for your children, for rent, for bills. I patched your holes with my savings until I had nothing left to give. And now, when I finally keep something for myself, I'm selfish." Dorian tried to reach for me, but I pulled back. His hand hovered in the air, trembling. "You don't understand," he said. "We're drowning. If you just—" "I understand perfectly." My voice cut through his. "You don't want my love. You want my house. You want to own me until there's nothing left." Sienna's lips curled. "If you loved your grandchildren, you'd help us. Do you want them to suffer while you sit in this decaying box?" The words stung, not because they were true, but because she knew exactly where to aim. I steadied myself, every scar from the diner stoves, every sleepless night, every insult and dismissal hardening into steel. "You will not shame me in my own yard. You will not take what is mine. This house is under a trust now. It belongs to me while I breathe, and it will go where I choose after I'm gone. Not a penny, not a board, not a brick will ever belong to you." For the first time, Sienna faltered. Her eyes widened, just a flash, before her fury returned. "You'll regret this," she spat. "Maybe," I said. "But I'd rather regret keeping my dignity than regret giving it away." I shut the door in their faces, locking every bolt. The car lingered, engine growling, until finally it disappeared down the street. The days that followed were strangely quiet. No more slashed tires, no more broken fences, no more threats in my mailbox. I watered my flowers, patched the small leaks, scrubbed the kitchen until it gleamed. The silence became my shield, a silence of my own choosing. But the storm wasn't over. One Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, Sienna stood there alone, no children, no Dorian. She wore her best dress, her face painted into a mask of sweetness. "May I come in, Mama?" she asked. I didn't move. "Why?" She pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "We started wrong, you and I. I only wanted the best for Dorian, for the children. I may have spoken harshly, but you have to understand, we're desperate." Her voice was honey, but her eyes were knives. "I do understand," I said. "That's why I helped you so many times. But I won't anymore." The mask slipped. "Do you think a piece of paper will stop us?" she hissed. "No," I said quietly. "But my will can." She blinked, thrown off balance. "I've chosen who inherits this house," I told her. "It won't be you. It won't be Dorian. I've already made it official. So you can scream, threaten, break, and beg, but the answer will never change." For a moment, Sienna was silent. Then she turned on her heel and stormed off without another word. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. I dreamed of Elias, of his calloused hands resting on the table after long days at the factory. I dreamed of Mireya's laughter at the diner, of the coworkers who treated me with more kindness than my own blood. I dreamed of the sunrise spilling through my window, painting the walls with gold. When I woke, the dreams clung to me like armor. I rose, brewed coffee, and sat by the window. The garden shimmered in the early light, the asters swaying gently, the marigolds glowing ivory. My hands ached, my back stiffened, but I felt strong. This house was never just wood and paint. It was proof of survival, of sacrifice, of independence wrestled from a world that wanted to keep me invisible. They had tried to strip it away, to turn my triumph into their gain. But I had won. Dorian would go on searching for easy outs, Sienna would go on scheming for shortcuts. But I had secured something they could never touch. My home. My freedom. My name etched into the deed not as a woman to be pitied, but as a woman who claimed what was hers. The battle had cost me what little family I had left, but in losing them, I found something else myself. And as the sun crept higher over Halcyon Grove, spilling light into every corner of my sanctuary, I knew the truth. I was not alone. I was home.